So UFC, you brokered a $4 billion deal. You also had personal experience with the Dodgers at over $2 billion, the Clippers for over $2 billion. It's easy to say buy low, sell high. Is there a ceiling? Will there be a ceiling? Is there more of a ceiling with some leagues than others? Where is that now?
Look, we think that franchise values are going to continue to increase for several reasons. One, you have a dramatic increase in the size of the global middle class. Middle class incomes usually correlate with spending on sports and entertainment, and that begins to drive a broader and more diverse consumer base for these properties. U.S. properties continue to be the dominant sports properties in the world. Obviously, EPL, La Liga, and others are also extremely important leagues. But as the consumer continues to invest in sports in terms of tickets and television viewings, the value of franchises will continue to increase. You also have, as a result of a lot of macroeconomic forces, more wealthy people than you've ever had. You continue to have very stable debt markets with relatively low interest rates, and the combination of all of those factors will continue to drive franchise values.
And more wealthy sports fans, or more wealthy fans who want an asset that will continue to appreciate well beyond what the numbers say.
Well, you know, many of the people that we've represented in the last decade since the Great Recession, you know, it used to be before the Great Recession, people were perhaps interested in sports because they had a passion for the game. They wanted to do something that they regarded as fun. Many more of them now are looking at these sports teams as massive wealth diversifications. You know, if you invest in the stock market right now, you've got to worry that it could be down 30 or 40% tomorrow. But sports franchises, even in the 2008 recession, held their value very well, and I think a lot of wealthy people are seeing them as hedges.
How much of it is the kind of Mona Lisa effect? There are only 30 of them in the NBA and 31 in the NHL, and there are a lot more people that want them than exist.
Look, scarcity value is always drives value. It doesn't matter whether it's classic cars, whether it's pieces of art, whether it's sports franchises, oceanfront real estate. Scarcity is a fundamental driver of value, and so that's one of the other fundamental underpinnings of values in sports.
And one of the other fundamental underpinnings, obviously, is the transcendental value of media rights. Everybody says that was it, no more, and then it continues to increase. It's too simple to say where are the media rights going, but what about the Snapchats, Facebooks, Googles? Are they going to be partners with the mainstream media entities for the next set of negotiations? Are they going to diversify and drive the values up? Is it a combination?
Yeah, well, look, we were just talking about this with Commissioner Bettman a few minutes ago. In 2021 and 2022, you have some of the most significant sports rights deals in the country coming due at once. Baseball, hockey, and football all have major packages that need to be renewed. And I think it's at that moment, usually about 18 months before they expire, that you see people engaging in a very robust way. And whether it's Facebook or Amazon or Google or Apple or one of the other Silicon Valley type companies, I think you will see one or more of them acquiring a significant package from one or more of those leagues. I think the network model will continue for the next decade after that in a harmony with those alternative providers, and then what happens in 2030 I think will depend upon audiences and technology.
We may not be around in 2030. We're not going to ask each other.
I'm going to be here. You just got to live cleaner.
Yeah, but that affects 2018, not necessarily 2030. Is social media dealt with in a different way? It is in some ways today, but 5-10 years from now, is all of that merged in one process, or is it diverse?
You know, I think what I've learned about social media is everything you think you know today changes in 6 weeks as the young people move on to the next platform. I think it will get further integrated with the live telecast. I think sports will still try to navigate that heads down on the device versus the heads up on the game. But I think as this generation of millennials takes hold as the principal portion of the season ticket base and of the television viewer base, they are accustomed to using social media on a moment-by-moment basis, and it's just going to get further integrated into the packages.
Globalization, again, it's easy to take the word in one broad context, but one thing that's held, Fox, ESPN, they're transcending, but a lot of the other networks are trying, but they're not moving as fast as they could be globally. The Alibabas are staying there, but coming over as well. Is there a trend in the future now to consolidate and treat media rights more globally?
Well, I think that's going to be a function of the Silicon Valley companies, the so-called FANG companies coming into sports. their audience is global. Facebook's audience is not bordered by national borders, and so those companies, I think, are beginning to see the value on a global basis of rights. I would expect them to ask for a very broad swath of rights when they come to the leagues. The leagues may want to gate them by geography in ways that they're not accustomed to, and that'll be part of the negotiation. But again, I go back to the earlier point. It's the global middle class that's growing, not just the American middle class that's growing, and I think sports rights are going to get disseminated throughout the globe.
Use decouching as a segue to talk about facilities. Media, obviously, there's an innate tension no matter what people say. You watch, you're comfortable at home, you're less likely to go to a facility. Yet, facilities are the only place to watch live sports these days. Generally, where are facilities going and the notion of public-private partnerships? If I hear another conversation about no more public money, it flies against the facts. But where do you think it's going broadly?
Look, I think public-private partnerships are here to stay. They've been pronounced dead in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so forth, and they're still here to stay. And if anything, if you look at a lot of the economic development that happens in cities outside of sports, they're still done with public-private partnerships. I think what will be interesting to see is what happens on the inside of those buildings. What's the size? What's the scale? How much is technology integrated? Because in your family room, every consumer electronics company in the world is investing. Whether it's Google, Amazon, Sharp, LG, they're all investing in your family room. Only the leagues are really, and teams are really investing in those stadiums and arenas. And so we're going to need a greater level of investment to make that live experience as vibrant as it can be. There's obviously a huge advantage in having the live sport right there. This generation of fans is going to expect more technological enhancements, and I think you'll see a greater percentage of budgets for new arenas and stadiums being dedicated to that.
So teams and leagues will control that process a little more than they are today, so there is some kind of mixture of process between the media rights around facilities and around the home experience and the facilities themselves? 10 years from now, 15 years?
I think it's going to be more people following best practices than any sort of necessity for further regulation. When people see whatever the next dynamic experience is in sports, they're all going to want to emulate it just as they emulated club seats and suites and a customer service experience that didn't previously exist at live sports events. I think you'll see that with technology.
Colleges, now, you guys represent Learfield, you represent you represent everybody everywhere. It's kind of hard to do this. But from a college perspective, future trends, broadly defined, do colleges look more like pro sports, football, baseball 10 years from now? Or do we have some litigation that tries to redefine where the Power 5 conferences are relative to everything?
Look, again, I think you got to talk about which piece of the business we're talking about. I think Larry Scott, Jim Delaney, and others just over the last 7 or 8 years have brought an increasing amount of sophistication to the business side of college sports in terms of a better exploitation of media rights. The presidents that serve on their boards are exercising more control over spending that money wisely for the benefit of both the athletes and the overall missions of the schools. I think you're going to see an increase in that sophistication at the AD level. I think you can already see it at a number of schools. Athletic directors are coming from all walks of business. They're highly trained people. They're going to be running their programs in a very sophisticated way because they have enormous expense demands on them, not only the cost of feeding, housing, training the athletes and protecting them, but meeting all of the expectations of the broader missions of the universities. I think the court cases will be going to trial sometime in 2018, we expect, but I think people also need to bear in mind that schools have a broader mission. These are not professional sports leagues. The labor laws don't work terribly well in this context, and the Supreme Court has consistently sustained the principle of amateurism. That is the distinction between college sports and everything else. Minor league sports do not drive nearly the interest from fan or player that college sports drives. Amateurism is the distinction between minor league sports and major college sports. I think that principle will be preserved. I think it needs to be to preserve college sports as we currently enjoy it and to allow the sports to work better with the missions of the universities.
Well put. Does the litigation, however, take more of an active role in driving some of this change? Power 5 relative to others, minor sports relative to others, Title IX relative to others, especially since, as you pointed out, there is no labor union with which to bargain. So the courts may be the ones that are helping to define this leverage?
Well, but again, I don't know that they can really define it, and I think judges need to be careful about wandering into territory that they may not fully appreciate. In professional sports, it's a very binary relationship. There is one union that represents a group of players and one league that is bargaining with that union. That is not the case in college sports. You have public universities that under state law cannot be unionized. You have private universities that could be, but potentially by a multitude of unions. You don't have that unified principle that you have in sport. You also don't necessarily have the infrastructure there that would allow those labor discussions to happen in a way that would be effective for allowing these athletes who have relatively short times at those universities to play. You know, a lockout at a university level could deprive somebody of the bulk of their varsity experience.
So, Joe Leccese has a rare ability to, according to the documents, since he's running this place, shape the law. There are very few brochures that actually talk about things other than what they're doing. You have a real commitment to help define what the future looks like in the business. You have the leverage and the vision and ability to do that. Having said that, what does the business broadly defined look like 5 years from now?
Well, one of the things we've certainly invested heavily in at the firm is the development of our young women lawyers, especially in our sports group. And I think what you're going to see over the next 5 years is that current generation of women executives who are currently in their mid to late 30s, who are getting to the point where they can lead teams, lead leagues, lead major sponsor relationships on the corporate side. And I think one of the things that's going to change dramatically in this business is the representation and influence of women, and I think that'll be a great thing.
Doing well versus doing good, the power of sports. We've seen what it means after natural disasters, after Vegas, after Boston Strong. What do you see as the obligation of sports teams and leagues to do the right thing, and why is sports so special that will give them and us the platform to do that?
Well, look, sports has always transcended traditional political divides, traditional other sort of demographic divides in this country. It's why the live experience is so vibrant. You have people from all walks of life there. I think as a result, teams have a unique connection with their community that other businesses may not. I don't know a team, I don't know a league that doesn't have a very vibrant community outreach program, a very vibrant charity program. The causes that are supported by those charities vary from community to community based upon what's important to that community. You saw the Saints after Katrina. You saw so many of these teams really lead the resuscitation of spirit, of optimism, of hope in their communities, and do good work underneath that. And I think that's just an essential part of being a community asset.